Well, the wave of sexual misconduct allegations that toppled the careers of many prominent people from Hollywood to Washington and ignited a national reckoning over sexual harassment in the workplace is now a major focus for the courts. In his yearly report on the federal judiciary, Chief Justice John Roberts announced an initiative to ensure there are proper procedures to protect law clerks and other court employees from sexual harassment, writing, quote, "Events in recent months have illuminated the depth of the problem of sexual harassment in the workplace, and events in the past few weeks have made clear that the judicial branch is not immune." Joining me now again is Julia Ainsley, NBC News national security and justice reporter, and Hugh Hewitt. He's an MSNBC political analyst and the host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Julia, let me start with you. I mentioned that this happened here over the past few weeks. What brought this about? The Chief Justice does this every year. He issues a report like this. Half of this one, or more than half of this one, is focused on how courts react when there are natural disasters. And then there's this. What led to it?
Right, this was kind of tucked in toward the bottom, David, and we're reading all this New Year's Eve, and then all of a sudden this really jumped out to me, that they're ordering this review. Of course, we have to remember that just a few weeks ago, Judge Alex Kozinski, who's on the appeals court in the Ninth Circuit, stepped down after 15 women came forward and told media, of course, that they had been the subject of lewd comments and harassment by Judge Kozinski. This really set off a firestorm in the federal judiciary community. There are a lot of people who worked under him. He was, a great legal mind. A lot of people really had talked about how much he contributed to presidents over the years. But he, of course, stepped down because of this, which shows that perhaps there are, two things. One, we're in a new era. That people, no matter your status, you're not immune when you have a we're coming out like this, coming up with these very serious allegations. And then second, that the judiciary community can't be impervious itself. And so Chief Justice Roberts here wanted to order this review so that they could still stand as a body with integrity. If they are supposed to be the lead court of the nation and to be weighing what is right and wrong, he wants to make sure that they have an outlet. People who are working and the judiciary have an outlet to bring these claims forward. A lot of these claims with Judge Kozinski dated back years. And so in this case, he wanted to be sure that there is a proper outlet, and there could be changes, David, as a result of this review.
Hugh Hewitt, let me read a little bit from that report. The Chief Justice writing, quote, "The judiciary will begin 2018 by undertaking a careful evaluation of whether its standards of conduct and its procedures for investigating and correcting inappropriate behavior are adequate to ensure an exemplary workplace for every judge and every court employee." Sounds like a panel is going to be created here to deal with this. How optimistic are you that it's going to lead to change?
The Chief Justice is in charge of this sort of ethical overview of the courts, and I'm very, very certain he will follow through on this. There are 890 federal judges, David, and as Julia said, change is coming to their chambers. They employ about 3,000 to 4,000 district and federal and appeal court clerks. I used to clerk on the D.C. Circuit years ago. It's a very unique relationship for a young law student who's just gotten out of law school to go to be a court clerk. And if you're in that relationship, it's hugely beneficial. I clerked for two great lions of the law, Roger Robb and George McKinnon on the D.C. Circuit. They were wonderful gentlemen. But in that 890 group of federal judges, there's going to be creeps and there are going to be saints, and there's a bell curve. So the Chief Justice is going to assure that not only for those clerks, but for the additional 25,000 people who work for the federal judiciary, Article 3, Branch 3, there is a means of bringing forward complaints, whereas before they might have felt too vulnerable, too isolated. And when you are working as a clerk to a federal judge, you work in a very close relationship that is sheltered from purview. It's very quiet. It's very confidential. No one really knows what goes on inside of the chambers of a Supreme Court judge or a district court judge or a bankruptcy judge. Chief Justice is very serious about this. I'm sure it will lead to a procedure by which anyone who feels harassed can report.
Julia, what do we know of when this report's going to be prepared here? I want to ask you, too, just about how quickly this came about. You think of the U.S. judiciary as a rather slow-moving body, and here we see a fairly quick reaction to what was reported in the Post here just a few weeks ago.
That's true. Of course, the timing of this was the year-end report, and so I think the Chief Justice here wanted to use this opportunity to address this. If he had sort of skimmed over a pretty huge event in the community, that would have maybe seen as he was ignoring this. So I think this was the time for him to address it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this panel will do work in an expeditious fashion. I mean, I wouldn't expect it to take years. Certainly, this is something that they could work on in the next few months to the end of the year. But I think that the point here is that they want to do this in a deliberate way where people feel that like Hugh said, that they can come forward and report this, especially because these relationships, as Hugh pointed out, are just really can be imbalanced as far as power. When you have someone who is obviously the top of their career and someone very new coming out of law school, and they need to benefit as much as they can from that experience, they still need to be in a place where they can report anything that's inappropriate. So it's a difficult challenge. Yeah.
Hugh Hewitt here in 2018. I just want to take stock of the moment that we've been talking about here, particularly in the context of politics. We saw in Hollywood a group being created here to continue to push forward on this issue of sexual harassment and sexual abuse in that context in Hollywood. We're seeing outside groups in politics now raising money to encourage those who've been victims to come forward. What do you make of that, and how big a role do you think this is going to play in political discourse in Washington in 2018?
Enormous. I think we have learned that there is no segment of society that is immune to what I call the creep factor. And I've seen in recent weeks academia is now coming to grips. This is the most recent series of revelations coming to do with long-tenured professors and very powerful figures in their departments are now facing old allegations anew, and their tenure is not going to protect them. So I expect the Me Too movement, the stepping forward of victims and people who have been harassed and people who have been assaulted and even raped to continue and to expand into every segment, be taken very seriously with due process. We realize false allegations can be made, and we have to be careful about that. But the vast majority of these allegations are not false, and we've realized now it's got to go forward and go forward with all due speed.
All right, Hugh Hewitt, Julia Ainsley, thanks very much for your time, both of you.